Welcome back to the Latam MedTech Leaders Podcast. Today, our guest is Frank Orlowski. Hey, Frank. It's good to have you here in the show today. I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly.
You're perfectly correct. And thank you for having me, Julio.
Awesome, Frank. All right, listeners. Frank is the founder and president of Ation. How do you pronounce it, Frank?
Ation Advisory Group.
Okay, good.
Like
Ation
innovation, commercialization.
Oh, very good. Ation Advisory Group, where he is helping global life science companies commercialize their product, services, or technologies, along with obtaining dilutive and non-dilutive funding, right?
People need to raise money, sure,
yes,
especially
absolutely.
in life science, right?
As a retired Pfizer executive, Frank worked for 25 years, very impressive, in positions of increased responsibilities in finance, strategy, and operations. Frank led the supply chain and finance functions across 35 countries in Asia, Eastern Europe, Latin America, where he supported 9 countries, and also the Middle East. Frank currently sits on the area board of the American Cancer Society, and he also holds a BS in accounting from Providence College and an MBA in international finance at NYU Stern School of Business. So Frank, it's really a privilege to have you here today. I really look forward to
It's a pleasure to be here.
Chat. Awesome. All right, Frank, let's start with your journey to Latin America. How do you get involved in the region personally and professionally?
Sure, yeah. So when I started Pfizer, again, I hope I look a little young to retire. So I started when I was 21 years old, right out of school. And they basically, in the corporate finance world, they said, we're going to put you financially responsible for an area called all other. And at Pfizer at the time, it was all about Europe, all about the US. Viagra just was launched, and that's where all the money came from and all the revenue. But I quickly realized that all other was emerging markets, and emerging markets included Latin America, where I was fortunate to lead the finance teams and really help Pfizer grow from the ground up in the countries that I supported. So we literally went into a country where we were maybe using distributors or third parties, and we put Pfizer Oval in that market. And again, we started from the ground up. We built manufacturing, distribution, sales, and everything in that market. So it was extremely rewarding for me to be able to do that in parts of the world like Latin America.
Fantastic, Frank. All right, so let's talk about trends in Latin America, Frank. What major epidemiological, economic, and political trends or social trends you see happening in the region that are relevant to our discussion today?
Sure, absolutely. I guess on a positive side, and some people may disagree with me, the influx of investment from China, I think, is a positive thing, because I mean people don't realize this. For example, in Brazil, the Chinese and the Brazilians have a lot in common. If you've ever stood in line in Brazil, it's the same way to stand in line in China, and they're realizing that has relatively good education. They're trying to grow in the med tech space, so they want to be in the forefront of that. So I think the positive side, you're seeing the investments from the outside, like China. Mm-hmm. You're also seeing trends where, when I first started, they were happy for the governments in Latin America were happy to have you just put in secondary packaging or really non-sophisticated types of labeling or creating boxes. Now the governments are demanding high-tech manufacturing. So if companies like Pfizer want access to revenue or tenders to sell their med tech or life science wares, they have to put in real infrastructure that's going to create high-tech jobs. So, and on the negative side, you always, look, you hear about the corruption, right? I mean, I'll be brutally honest with you. Pfizer's an American company. The challenge I have as a finance lead in that part of the world and others is that, look, I live in New York City. So every day, if I don't give my doorman, money, if I don't give the guy that parks the car money, if I don't give, money, I can't get anything done. But yet in Pfizer, if you do that, it violates FCPA and SEC regulations, and it makes things very, very difficult. So Pfizer was able to succeed by being compliant and doing it in creative ways, but it tends to be that could be a challenge, because it's part of the culture. And I'm not saying bribery or tipping is a bad word. It's just part of that culture.
Yeah. All right, Frank. What's your overall perception about Latin America as a place to conduct clinical research or to sell medical technologies in general?
I think it's underappreciated, quite
Mm,
honestly. Like, I mean, if you look at Anvisa, which is, it literally is more sophisticated and more advanced than the FDA. It
mm,
is the gold standard. We would
mm.
always say that if you can get something approved in Brazil or Colombia, you can get it approved anywhere. So I don't think people appreciate that about that part of the world. I
Mm.
also, just so you know, I mean, Pfizer's first production of Prevnar, which is the pneumonia vaccine, outside of Europe and the U.S. was in Argentina.
Huh.
So it was a partnership with the government in Argentina, and the way the Argentina government approached it in a very sophisticated way was, look, if you fill the vaccine here, we will give you access to government tenders to distribute the product. And I think you're seeing a lot more governments in a very sophisticated way doing that across Latin America, and that's going to attract more investment. And the people are probably, I would say, even more educated than most other parts of the world in
Mm.
that life science space.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Interesting. Awesome. Very good. I'm glad you have this positive perception of the region. All right, Frank, let's get in some more detail here. Let's talk about the countries where you've had experience in Latin America. In your bio, it mentions 9 countries. Can you give us some more details
Sure. I
on
mean,
that?
highlights. Yeah, I guess for me, I mean, to be honest with you, when I first started, Venezuela was an extremely
Mm,
profitable market for Pfizer. We built that up because they allowed us to. We built a manufacturing facility in Valencia,
mm,
which was doing some blending and filling and pretty
mm,
sophisticated manufacturing at the time. And the government purchased our drugs at high margins, and it was an amazing partnership. And again, it was one of Pfizer's most profitable markets. Unfortunately, given geopolitical issues, tied to oil, it became a challenge for Pfizer. But just the people and the drive of Venezuela was made probably the biggest impact in Latin America for me personally. And I enjoyed my time there for sure. Working with it, and we had to deal with unions. We had to deal, but we made it happen. We made it work. We persevered. We worked with the people. Uh, Brazil was became Pfizer's most
mm,
important markets, where we had 3 manufacturing facilities: consumer healthcare. And then we had also an animal health facility where we did manufacturing, and also human health. So we had in manufacturing over 1,000 people, and I enjoyed the people, the sense of belonging, the sense of including me. It wasn't, oh my gosh, here comes these guys from New York
mm.
headquarters and Pfizer, and they're here to run the show. No way. It was a real partnership, and the family is important, and you were entering their homes. And to me, that's an incredible part about Latin America that people don't realize.
Wow,
And
fantastic. Yeah. So you being a lover of the place in Latin America. I mean, well, pretty
I
much
mean,
all
absolutely,
countries.
it was
Yeah.
I'm not just saying this because I'm on, but it was they were family to me. In fact, my biggest compliment I got was from one of the chiefs of staff in Brazil. Her name was Adriana, and she said to me, she's like, I think you in another life you were from Latin America. Your last name wasn't Orlowski. You weren't Polish and German and Italian. You were Latin America because you
Yeah.
have that feeling, and
Okay.
it was very special for me, and
Very good. Very
really good.
good. Very
And
good.
I think I shared this with you earlier when I did retire, because I did support them for 22 years. They gave me this book, which was
Wow.
Latin America Memories, and it's filled with all the times I spent with my friends and various things, and everything I did in Latin America
That's
across all of the countries.
fantastic.
And and this to me is only in Latin America would this happen, and that's why it's such a
Yeah.
special place in my heart.
Wow. Very good. Very good, Frank. All right. So moving along here, Frank, let's talk about regulatory approvals in these countries. I mean, what's been your experience here?
It's difficult, and the people think but it's again, because of the things have to be done on the up and up. They require uh, strict regulations with additional testing and stability that has to be done in the country. And I always said, if you could get something approved in Brazil with Anvisa, and secondly Colombia, you can get it approved in anywhere else in the world. So they're very strict. People think, oh, it's not strict. very, very strict regulations. And that includes Mexico. Mexico was Pfizer's most complicated market. And I would say it's because pharmaceuticals are treated like consumer products in a lot of cases, where you can go into a pharmacy and get things without a prescription. So we had more SKUs that we sold in pharmaceuticals in Mexico than anywhere else in the world.
Wow. Why is that?
There were so many different brands. There were so many different things penetrating the market and unique brands for that market. So, a little story, in Mexico, we had a drug called Viagra Jet, and it was the only chewable Viagra in the entire world. And it was only for the Mexican market. And it was developed purely for the Mexican market. And it was very fast acting because you would chew it, and it would immerse itself through the lining of your gums, and it would be fast acting. So Latin America allows things to be put on the market in a more creative way, which is great. Ponstan is another drug. It's a drug for menstrual cramps for women, and we had a unique formulation just for Brazil for that drug.
Huh. Interesting. Very much interesting. I mean, I guess that's a clear example of you plan globally, but you execute locally, right?
Absolutely. In Latin America, you have to do that, and Pfizer did very well by doing that across the continent.
Okay. All right. So, what about nightmares trying to get products approved? I mean, do you have any bad stories or success stories?
Well, a lot of times the challenge we would have is that when we had a product that required cold chain storage, special handling, we often had problems, and it could be the active has to be a certain temperature, and then it has to be filled locally in Brazil based on requirements, or in Argentina or what have you. Because of to be really honest with you, lack of cold chain refrigeration in Latin America, that often became a problem, especially when we were importing and it was in customs, for example, in Brazil or in Ecuador. To be able to get it out of customs in an expedited manner, that's following compliance and controls, was oftentimes very difficult. So we had to write off a lot of materials that were just spoiled because of the heat.
Yeah. All right. Okay, what about distributors? I mean, how was your structure in Latin America in terms of distribution and all that,
so
or direct forces?
No, it depended. It depended on the market. So in Mexico, we had a very sophisticated warehouse structure that we did on our own. It was a giant automated warehouse, and then from that warehouse in Toluca or Santa Fe, we were then distributing across the country using our own network. In markets like Argentina, where we did have local manufacturing, we would rely on a third-party distributor to manage it for us. So it's country specific. Let's put it that way. But that presents its own set of challenges, right? You have some corruption issues and whatnot sometimes, and pallets of pharmaceuticals may disappear. But for the most part, we found very successful partners, or we did it ourselves.
Yeah, sure. All right. What about doing due diligence on these distributors where you had distributors? I mean, do you guys have a specific process? Or what are your thoughts on choosing distributors?
So we had to, again, because of the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act and Pfizer being an American publicly traded company, we had a very, very stringent due diligence where we had to not only audit the company, we had to audit their customers. So we demanded a list of every single customers that distributor had in that country, and we would perform audits on those customers to see how they were integrating or operating with that distributor. And if there was any irregularities, we wouldn't do business with that distributor. So it was a very formal checklist that we would have to go through. And mainly it was on the service, reliability, and compliance and controls.
Well, you guys were Pfizer. I mean, you can demand documents, you can demand distributors.
Yeah, and that, you bring up a good point, Julio. It's tough for the smaller companies that are trying to do business and enter Latin America. And I think that's where Latin America could do a little bit better is embracing those more entrepreneurial one product companies that maybe have a product that hasn't been fully approved yet, but they want to enter it into a given market. They're starting to do that. They're starting to have incubators and attracting investment for smaller companies. I'm seeing that across Latin America as a trend, but that's an area where there could be some improvement.
Yeah, sure. All right. So, what's your thoughts? What are your thoughts on importing products and nationalizing products into Latin America? Any good or bad experiences?
Yeah, I mean, look. I think if I'm putting myself in the shoes of Latin America, they are being much more wise and sophisticated and telling big pharma, similar to the Argentina example, no, don't make it in Ireland or Singapore. You need to make it here in Colombia or in Ecuador. You need to make it here and create the jobs, create the infrastructure. Then we're going to sell it, and we'll be your backer. We'll even buy your drugs as a government purchaser. We'll give you tax rebates. We'll give you incentives. But please create the jobs and the technology here. Whereas the beginning of my career, no, that wasn't the case. You didn't need to build a manufacturing plant. You could just import everything and use third-party distributors, like I mentioned. And then the second trend was no, build a factory here, create jobs, manufacture, distribute. But it wasn't sophisticated manufacturing. It was just packaging, labeling, secondary. And now the trend is they want the more sophisticated technology and manufacturing in the country.
Yeah. It looks like you, even though you're retired, semi-retired, you're still keeping up with the trends of Latin America.
In my consulting world with Ation Advisory Group, I have a number of clients that I support in Latin America. A lot of them are Chinese clients that want to localize in Brazil, but they don't know how. Or I have a German pharmaceutical client that has a certain hormonal product that they want to distribute across Chile, but they don't know how to do it. They don't know how to navigate Chile, and that's a lot of the work I do to help these companies find a trusted partner through my network at Pfizer.
Fantastic.
Because as you know, Julio, as a Latin America, when you become friends with someone from Latin America, they're your friends for life.
Yeah,
right? They're like your hermano or your brother. And it's not easy. You don't get that on day one. You have to earn it, but once you get it, you got it.
That's true. It's really key to have strong personal relationships in Latin America. They really want to get to know you first before they do business with you. That's
exactly.
And
that's a thing that a lot of Americans don't get. They want to go in and they immediately say, all right, whoa, wait a minute. Let's step back. I always said, Julio, and all the people that I supported in Latin America, there are three things in life. And all the teams that I had, I managed a team of over 100 finance professionals in Latin America. I said it's your relationship with God, your relationship with your family, and then your job. And if your job ever gets above your relationship with a higher power and your relationship with your family, then you have to answer to me, because that's a problem.
Good point. Very good point. This is a wise point, actually. That's really the word.
And it resonated. I mean, it resonates around the world, but it particularly resonated in Latin America because of the family is so important. That family network is so important across Latin America, and I admire that. And I wish the rest of the world, and this is just me personally, would emulate that.
Yeah. I see that a lot in conference calls and meetings or video meetings nowadays because of the COVID-19 crisis. If you have a meeting with somebody from Latin America, you start the meeting just talking about stuff, about life, about family, about soccer, about something.
But you should do that. That's what you should do.
You establish a rapport with the person. Whereas in the US, you start a meeting with a gringo, and I mean, they may talk about the weather for 3 seconds, and then they jump right into the topic of the conversation.
And I would love that I bring in some less, some of the Pfizer executives into meetings in Latin America, because I needed them to come down, and we would have conversations around the table, and they would look at me like, how are you? Why are we talking about this? This is amazing that we're talking about things that may be on the fringe of not being politically correct in the U.S. And it was always very, very interesting. But I have to say one thing, Julio, and it came into my head when we were talking about family. I was part of the I was invited to be part of the Pfizer Latin American Community Club that they had, and it was about 100 Latin American professionals around the world, and they would bring in executive speakers. Pfizer has a board member that is Latin America. There were some other executives, and one of the things they said that they need to work on is, because Latin Americans love their family so much, which is such an amazing thing, sometimes it holds them back in their career, so that they don't get to that level of a president or CEO, because if something happens with the family, you take care of them right away. And I admire that. I think that's wonderful. But they were saying themselves that they think that's why there's not as many executives at that top level that are Latin America, because the focus is not on work, family first. And it kind of, you know, I could see that as a pro and a con, but to me, family is the most important. So.
Yeah, it has to be a balance, but you're absolutely right. It probably comes from our Mediterranean heritage, Italy, Spain, France. I mean, the Mediterranean, the Arabs. So they have
Family
different set of
network is
values.
everything.
Yeah.
Whereas gringos in America, they're like,
they're very practical. Anglo-Saxons are very practical. They want to get down to business as soon as possible. Well, they're the best in the world. I mean, I love the American culture in that regard. I mean, the best sales and marketing practices come from the U.S.
No, right. And Julio, I just you mentioned about my experiences. One interesting experience I had was in Chile. Chile is, in my opinion, very different than other markets in Latin America. The first time I went to Chile, you know, I expected to have that same feeling like Brazil or Venezuela, where, you know, it's joyful, and it's not. And I remember I made a comment to a coworker about that, and their simple response was, "Frank, it takes a generation." And I said, "Well, what do you mean it takes a generation?" They're like, "If you understood the history of Chile and how repressed they were, the fascism, the violence, that only happened within the past 20, 30 years. It's going to take an entire generation to remove that ill-repressed feeling." And I thought that was an amazing insight that I didn't appreciate until they mentioned it.
The same thing happened in Spain with Franco, in a way.
Yeah,
so,
exactly.
Yeah, makes sense. All right, Frank, moving along here, let's talk about corruption in Latin America. I mean, I want to hear your thoughts on this. You kind of touched upon that at the beginning of the call, but what's your experience? Bribery, corruption?
You know, it's not something that's isolated just to Latin America. It's all over the world. You know, if you don't negotiate, because sometimes Americans will just see a cost on a sticker and they pay for it, and that's offensive in many parts of the world to not negotiate, including in Latin America. It's part of the culture. So Americans don't realize that, but the corruption is, as I mentioned at the beginning, you know, we bribe and tip all day long and to get contractors in buildings and things like that. But the Pfizer and American companies are under very, very strict laws with the SEC and with FCPA to try to level the playing field. So it makes very, very difficult. And I think the challenge is in Latin America is a lot of times the government officials, the customs officials, the ones that are approving the drugs, they don't realize that U.S. companies are handcuffed when it comes to bribery and corruption. So the way we've found to get around that is we've done training programs across Latin America, across the Middle East, and across Asia, where we educate the customs officials or government officials to say, in a case study format, you know, real world examples of, this is an example where maybe you would bribe in Latin America or in Asia, but we're just not able to do this because of SCPA. And you know what? They appreciated that. They then now understand the rules of engagement in the U.S. and that transparency made for much better engagement. And it actually helped us to get approvals in a faster time, to get things distributed, to get things through customs, because they just understood that the rules were different in the U.S.
Okay. Very good. Very good. Okay, Frank, switching topics a little bit and going back to what you were discussing about the different countries. I see the companies, you also mentioned about smaller companies, and those are typically the companies I deal with in my daily activities. They sometimes struggle to really understand Latin America, to understand the different countries, the priorities on how to allocate resources and money and distributors and all that. What would you recommend in terms of market access? What would be your top countries and why?
No, I think that's a great question because market access is one of the things I'm helping with within Ation Advisory Group, and it's critical. And you first of all, you need to find a trusted partner. You need to find, and it can't be a partner that's in the U.S. that knows somebody in Latin America or is in Canada but has business in Latin America. You need that face-to-face with that partner, and you have to establish that trusted partner early on in any engagement. And again, it shouldn't be a chop shop of someone that has 99 other products that they're going to try to bring into the country and sell. You really need to do your diligence, go on LinkedIn, go to your contacts and find that one trusted partner that will help you in that country. It doesn't have to be in your industry. It could be in another industry, but as you know, with the network in Latin America, which is so strong, people know I got a guy, I could call this person, but you got to find that one trusted partner first. And that's, I think, a lesson learned that I had with Pfizer, where we were going first with a company in Panama, and they were the conduit to get us into all those countries in Latin America, and everything had to go through that Panama City partner and distributor. And then we said, no, this just isn't right. We can do this ourselves. Let's find the people ourselves. And to me, that's I know it's harder, right? Because if you're have the means or the size of a Pfizer to get into that country, it'll take a little bit longer, but you can still do it. Go on, go into LinkedIn, go do networking, go on to Google and meet and find people that could make those personal introductions in that specific country. So to me, that's the biggest lesson learned and most important thing you need to do.
Agree. Yes, totally right. And in terms of naming countries, what country would be your top priorities in Latin America if you were the CEO of a pharmaceutical or medical device company?
I mean, I think Brazil is got the most, again, because of there's Chinese investment. There's a lot of entrepreneurial spirit there. They're getting they're setting up these hubs of technology, these research centers. Like in the U.S., we have things called J Labs or think tanks or other types of organizations that bring in incubators. There's a lot of that going on in Brazil. So to me, that would be the first market that I would harness for that. And I know I mentioned Panama as a conduit, but even in Panama, there are definitely some incubator labs that are going on that are seeding startups in those markets. Another good resource, and Pfizer's used them, is the Chamber of Commerce in those markets, because they can open the door for you with trusted partners.
Okay. Are you familiar with the Pacific Alliance and what's
Absolutely.
going on? Okay.
Very. That's a. Thank you for bringing that. That's an excellent. In fact, we had a meeting that we attended in Costa Rica with the Pacific Alliance, and that's an important trade partner to have. And if you can dial into that, and it's not that hard to dial in. You don't have to be a Pfizer to get into that, but that'll really help to open the doors for sure.
Okay. All right. We're towards the end of the show, Frank here, but Paco. So let's talk about fun. What do you think about Latin America as a place to do business? I mean, is it a fun place? Is it a boring place?
Oh my God, it is. I come back every time I traveled again all over the world, and every time I came back from Latin America, my wife would notice, wow, you're full of energy. I'm like, I had because people are just so much fun. They're personal, and it wouldn't be at the end of the day, go back to the hotel room, do room service. No way. It was, come to my house. Let's do a barbecue.
Yes.
And in Argentina, and when we did negotiations, my boss and I, what we would do is we would pick topics to do during the day, and then we'd have a handful of very important topics that we made sure we did over a drink or at the barbecue or at the family's house. And it was amazing. And that sense of family, and every single Pfizer facility in Latin America would always have a social center. You know, it wasn't some elaborate thing, but it was an area for picnic tables and barbecue. And that didn't happen in the factories in Europe or in the US. And I'm not saying, but it was that sense of family. And then during those times, the people on the management team would bring their wives and their spouses and their family. And honestly speaking, Julio, the friends I have today that I still call upon, most of them in Pfizer are from Latin America. And I speak to them on a regular basis.
Nice.
And we still partner and do business together.
Wow.
And they're amazing. So that is, it is, from that standpoint, it's my favorite market. And I have not met anybody that has disagreed with me once they get engaged into Latin America and they get beyond the safety issues in Brazil or once you get past that, all bets are off, and it's phenomenal. I can't say enough about Latin America.
Yeah, which is not that bad. I mean, the safety issue is not bad if you're with somebody local.
And you don't flaunt things, and you behave normally, and you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right.
Yeah. All right. So before we end the show, Paco, there's a question I always ask my guests here. If you had in front of you the CEO of a small biotech or pharma or medical device company in the US or Europe, just contemplating doing something in Latin America, research, or selling their innovations, what would you say? What would be your words of wisdom to that CEO?
It's an amazing place to do business. Just do your homework, set up infrastructure yourself, find the person directly. I would not recommend using a third party or a distributor because you're maybe afraid to localize or go in. Don't be afraid. Find the partner in each specific market that could help you, because it is, even though it's Latin American culture and to your point, it could be of Spanish origin or Portuguese origin. Every country still has its own nuance and great uniqueness. And, soccer is the common divide, as we know, football in Latin America. But the words of wisdom would be find a partner in each individual market that is going to help you to build your business from the ground up. And don't be afraid to jump in with both feet all in Latin America, because it'll pay dividends going down.
Yeah, I agree. All right, Paco. And tell us about your company, the type of work you do with your clients. And how can people get in contact with you?
No, thank you. So when I after 25 years, when I retired from Pfizer after traveling 80% of the time, I am years in service reached a certain number. I put my hand up and I said, I'm ready. And obviously at the time, at 46 years old, my wife was like, there's no way you're sitting at home. So I formed an advisory group called Ation Advisory Group, ATION, as in commercialization, globalization, innovation. And what I've done is I've formed a network of Pfizer retirees in all specialties, whether it's engineering, research, and I've also formed with investment partners to do raises for companies that are looking for funding. And what Ation does is that we help to point the direction of some companies to get funding. Then we come in and we help them side by side to provide them support and leadership and help them to grow their company and ultimately commercialize their product in their home country, but then ultimately globally in the 35 plus countries that I have a strong network in. So we really do things from the ground up, and it's a very entrepreneurial type organization because that's what I did at Pfizer. Even though Pfizer's a gigantic company, I went into markets my entire career, and from the ground up, we built out the organization. And that's what I'm doing now for my clients that I'm helping.
Great value proposition, Paco.
Thank you, Julio.
All right. So thank you so much.
Perfecto.
Hasta
luego. Thank you so much.
I really love the conversation.
Anytime. And if anything I could do to help you or your friends, or you have any questions, please don't hesitate to email me at frank@ationadvisory.com or look me up. And I'm always happy to help, my friend.
Fantastic, Paco. Bye-bye.
Take care, Julio. Bye-bye. Thank you very much.